So this video is just a really quick broad strokes overview of the course skills and what we're going to cover in each module. There is a PDF in this section that has 3 pages that summarize each of the 10 skills in bullet points form. And of course, each module is going to go in more depth, but if you like to kind of look at it in that written format, it will be there. This video is a quick summary, so if anything I'm saying sounds kind of vague or confusing, the modules will explain it all in much more detail and clarity. So what we're going to cover is an understanding of the neuroscience of what I call connection and self-protection. Skill 1 is an understanding of how your nervous system and brain states work, and basically the neurobiology of why we do what we do in relationships. I make this an initial foundational skill because in my experience, I found many couples have been able to dig in and really commit to the work with more understanding of themselves and their partner and create more compassion when there is an understanding of the reasoning on a biological and even evolutionary level, why we do what we tend to do in relationships and why we get stuck repeating the same patterns over and over, even when those patterns maybe are destructive or do not seem to be getting us what we want. The next really important foundational skill is what I call relational consciousness. This is basically the skill and practice of learning how to build awareness to when you are triggered, activated, and flooded, and learning to pause to enable you to respond in a more relational way. Without this ability to pause and build this awareness, we will continue to get pulled back into the same cyclical patterns. The third skill is actually a set of skills that are essentially nervous system regulation skills. Once we can learn to identify what state we are in, then we can be responsive to that state rather than reactive and learn the tools and strategies for how to help shift our nervous system from a dysregulated and activated state to a regulated state so we can be responsive versus reactionary. Skill 4 is all about how to increase your connection, closeness, and intimacy through what the Gottmans call your emotional bank account. This skill is all about building more connection and closeness for multiple reasons. For starters, is one of the main reasons we're all in relationships is because connection feels good and most of us want more of it. Also, because this is the foundation for whether our perspective on our relationship is positive or negative and serves as a backdrop for the cycles of connection versus self-protection that I talked about earlier. Then skill 5 and 6 are all about understanding what we call your conflict cycle and creating what I like to call your conflict cycle compass. It's an understanding you guys as a couple, what unique cycle you are stuck in and what you are doing that is not working and why you keep doing it and why it is so hard to stop. And skill 6 specifically is figuring out your specific triggers and the history in your life that influences why you react the way that you do. Then, of course, the second half of the course is the thing that most of us are here for, which is where we really get into the skills for how to communicate more effectively. So skill 7 is, I call it the roadmap for repairing when you've had an issue, a misstep, or a fight. Repair is an integral skill and one many of us are actually not so great at or struggle with. I also connect this with the skill I called U-turns, which is a compassion-based practice for looking at yourself so you can repair more effectively. Skill 8 and 9 are where we start to break down what I refer to as relational communication and how to approach conflict and communication in a healthier and more relational way. I divide it into speaker or expressor skills, which is skill 8, and listener receiver skills, skill 9. The reason I do these skills later is that the front end skills are all about understanding everything that gets in the way of using the healthier communication skills. Most people who come to therapy or are learning in this way are aware that they could be handling conflict and their partner in a different way, may even know a lot about healthier ways to communicate. And despite trying, they keep getting stuck doing the old things. So the initial skills are targeting what is getting in the way of using these healthier conflict and communication skills. That way, once we get to those skills, you are more equipped to start and actually use them effectively. In my experience, I found that understanding the brain and our nervous system is incredibly helpful in arming us to understand ourselves and our partners better. On a personal level, I think I mentioned this in earlier videos, my life with my own partner and my work as a therapist transformed when I started studying the neuroscience behind couples conflict and reactivity. I don't think you need to get it on a deep level, and I am not trying to go deep in the weeds on any of it here in this course. I just want to give you enough that it makes sense, because all of it just makes so much sense. And I assure you, when we dig in, you will begin to understand the coherence of why you guys are stuck and why you're doing what you're doing. The final skill, skill 10, is an integration of everything that I encapsulate in the concept of shifting to a we mindset, which involves working on compromise, collaboration, and how you will maintain progress. If 1 to 9 are happening, then all these deepening and maintenance skills will flow much more easily, because when we feel safe and connected and we communicate from a space of relationality and mutual understanding, then it becomes so much easier to compromise, to deepen our intimacy and bond, and to want to put in the work to maintain what we've gained. It's still work, of course, but if the rest of this is happening, then these are much simpler things to put into place. So the order of the skills does matter, and to some extent they build on each other, and usually the preceding skills are important in being able to master the ones that come after. Each is not actually mutually exclusive in reality and practice, but understanding each preceding skill, I think, does help build the foundation for the next one. So I'm going to go through them in order, and rest assured, if something is not clear in an earlier modular skill, that it will likely be covered later. The reason I designed the course to be broken out into skills and to follow a particular order and map is because, for me, that makes it much more clear. Both being in my own relationship as well as attempting to help other couples struggle with complex relationship issues, the amount of content and things that are going on and that need to be addressed and worked through can feel really overwhelming and hard to tackle, hard to know where to begin. When I'm in therapy, if I stayed focused on the content and couldn't see the underlying patterns and what skill is needed to help those patterns, then I would have felt paralyzed in how to help couples. When we break it down to what are the dynamics that play underneath it all, then you can start to see that even though it happens incredibly quickly, there are a series of external triggering events and then internal events that occur in our neurobiology and brains that leave us stuck in these repetitive cycles and struggling to change and shift them. Once we really understand that, we can arm ourselves to strategically tackle each of those steps with specific skills that gives the foundation for intervening and changing. I've tried to break this out in a very specific and targeted way that I think makes it easier to really identify what you as an individual and a couple need to focus on. I feel like once you really understand the different pathways, I literally put it into a flow chart. You'll see it later on. Then we're going to see the interplay, and we're going to see what obstacles are getting in the way and where the problems are and where you really need to intervene, where you need to focus the work. That's it for now. See you soon.